recording. Okay, there we go. I'm sorry about that. Okay, now we just a quick introduction. Just for those of you that might not have been, with regards to I think everybody knows about the EU-CIP project, but it's basically aiming to develop a pan-European knowledge network for critical infrastructure resilience and protection. It's a coordination and support action, and we've got 20 partners from across Europe, including research institutes, companies, critical infrastructure operators, and of great importance is that we are, Jenny, I see your hands up.
Hi. Sorry to interrupt. I don't know whether you want to put your slides back on the mode where there you go.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you for that. Sorry. Thank you for that, Jenny. Sorry, folks. And of importance is that we're drawing upon a lot of support from the European Cluster for Security and Critical Infrastructures. And the whole point is that we're basically developing evidence-based policies to improve within this task, improving the innovation capacity of critical infrastructure operators. This is just a quick overview of the ECSCI cluster. There's 30 plus projects. Some of these are finished, some are just still some are relatively recently started, some are finished, some are still going. They're dealing with various types of infrastructure. The focus of most of the projects is on the cyber or physical or hybrid threats, but there is also some discussion within some of them dealing with natural hazards. The support services for innovation that we're developing, the whole point of this is to help innovators in the commercialization of their results. And this includes IPR management, business modeling, marketing promotion, and identifying markets and areas for innovation. We've started our sessions. We started them in October and we're continuing. We'll finish this first cycle in January. We're doing 2 cycles and we'll finish basically towards the end of the project, a couple of months before the end of the project. So we're starting with more general information, not sector specific, with group webinars. From this, we'll be presenting or providing homework, so to speak, documentation and such for people to complete, like various information sheets and templates. After that, for those that complete these documentation, we'll arrange one-on-one mentoring, and that'll be more specialized and more sector specific. And of course, after each section, we ask you to provide some feedback forms, which we did last time. People seem happy with what we're doing so far, but your input's very valuable. The first session, which we gave last month, market assessment and problem definition, was basically an introduction to commercialization. Today's session is on solution alignment and business planning, where we're dealing with customer engagement and business models. And the third will be going to market and support. So that's team and company structure. We'll also be looking at intellectual property and so forth. But today we will be covering these issues: strategies, forging customer relationships, the business model canvas and value proposition, and instances of business model implications. Now, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Mr. Patrick Durkin. Patrick's a co-founder and director at ICP with extensive experience in his area. He's led a wide range of commercial enterprises, companies like Teradata, Informax, SAS Institute. He was the CEO of iQuatat. He led the company at a very early stage to become a global leader in IT cost optimization. His role within ICP is to engage with research groups within the context of commercializing the outcomes. And he's in a broad range of fields and disciplines. So we're very happy, very pleased to have Patrick joining us. And Patrick, it's all up to you.
Super. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for the introduction, and delighted to be with you this afternoon. First, Kevin, can you confirm you can see my screen and it's in full screen?
I can see your screen and it's not quite full screen.
Quite full screen. Okay.
It's oh no. Yeah, I see it.
It's full screen for me.
Yes, no, it's fine.
Alrighty. So we're starting a little bit late, so I'm going to move quite quickly. We have a lot of topics I'd like to cover today. As Kevin says, this is module 2 of a 3-module sequence. And we're going to focus around customer engagement and business modeling. Now, some of the areas I'm going to go through, these are based on, I would say, my own experience over 30 years in the industry. They are real live use cases as much as possible, and hopefully you'll get value from it. And as we move on to the next areas, as Kevin outlined, in terms of one-to-one sessions, we can really explore them as regards how it works in EU-CIP. So the agenda we're going to go through today talks about customer engagement and business models. So the type of areas I want to cover and discuss a little bit is trying to understand, well, what do customers want? Because if you're going to engage with them, then ideally you should have some idea of what they're trying to, what they want. So we're going to walk through some of the elements of building your value proposition, the business model, and as Kevin says, some of the tools and techniques that can be used specifically in the critical infrastructure world as a follow-on. So let's dive in. So the first topic was very much about how do you go about forging strong customer relationships? Okay, so you are, let's say, in your critical infrastructure world, trying to reach out to your audience and try to understand how you can help them. The biggest challenge you have is trying to build credibility, trust, and value with them. So they need to know that you really know what you're talking about, that you are an expert in your area, and that you actually have their interests at the core of what you're going to do. So when we start talking about forging customer engagement, we're going to talk a lot about being focused around the customer. Now, it might seem very obvious, but as researchers and as innovators, we have a very strong tendency to focus on us, to focus on our tools and our research and our work, as opposed to focusing on the customer. So when people talk about customer engagement, there's many tools, webinars, social media, roundtables. Today, I'm not going to talk about the tools. I'm going to talk more about, so what are you going to discuss with your customer? If you're actually going to sit down with them and start to understand what it is they're trying to solve, what is your questions? How are you going to develop that conversation? Because if you ask customers, well, what do you want? Unfortunately, you get many different answers, sometimes contradictory. You know, they'll say, I want something to happen cheaper, faster, I want it to be confidential. But the big challenge you have as an innovator, and equally in the critical infrastructure world, is that if you're bringing a new product or a new solution to the market, your customer has to change some of the behaviors of what they're doing already. They have to start to think differently and behave differently. So the big question I would suggest you need to be considering before you step into your customer engagement is your customer ready to change? Are they ready to change the way they currently work or move forward into a new direction? So I'm going to now move on to what is the most critical element, I believe, and I've seen this repeatedly in many areas as regards why do customers change? Why did they change a behavior to actually do something different? And to me, the answer is very simple. There is always some pain, some reason to change. If there's no pain, if you cannot identify what exactly is the problem you're trying to solve, be it a critical business issue or an opportunity being missed, it doesn't matter how good your technology is. It doesn't matter how wonderful your Internet of Things measurement tools are. If it doesn't solve a problem related to the actual customer, nothing happens. They'll never really move forward. So this might seem like stating the obvious, but unfortunately, I'd say as researchers, we tend to focus much too quickly on our products and solutions, as opposed to what is the pain you're trying to solve. And as I outlined here, the pain may come from many different areas. Obviously, in your critical infrastructure worlds, it tends to be compliance or security concerns, but it may be many sectors, right up and down any business or organizational structure you could think of. It might be technology is simply getting old. There may be a lack of service. Customers are being lost because of competitive advantage. But ultimately, your job as an entrepreneur or as an innovator is to try and understand what is that pain you're trying to solve. And I would say if you're trying to build a strong customer engagement, you have to stay on that pain for a very long time. If you start to drift into, here's my product, here's my solution, here's my wonderful blockchain implementation, Internet of Things, you will lose the interest and engagement of your customers. So is this just something you do at the start? Short answer is no. You can never stop diagnosing the pain and keep exploring it, simply because you are ultimately creating a new product, something that is commercial, meaning that you probably want somebody to pay for whatever offering you're providing to them. So again, could be in critical infrastructure, could be a piece of technology. Somebody has to pay for it. Somebody has to see value from it. And if you're trying to figure out if your organization or company has a future, it's worth keeping in mind the research on the right-hand side here that says over 70% of all startups fail because basically they didn't build something that the customer really wanted. You can look at the concept of no market need, or they ran out of cash trying to find that market need. And unfortunately, it means they build a solution or a technology or an offering that ultimately doesn't address the pain of the actual target customer. So I would go through this many different ways, but it's so important and critical to stay in that area. So 2 more points I want to make. One is that pain, as I would describe it, is not one person. It's not just the head of infrastructure or the head of first responders or whatever. Pain flows through organizations and in many cases beyond those organizations. So this is a small example which you can look at after offline in manufacturing, where if somebody at a very senior level, executive level, may have an issue of missing profit goals, for example, in this area, the reasons tend to be something bubbling up from other areas of the business, and so on down to finding specific elements that actually have a cascading or an impact effect up and down through the business. So pain and trying to quantify pain trying to quantify pain in the organization. It's not a single person. You do have to start with a single person and try and understand what problem is a particular individual having when doing a task, or what problem that individual might have because of a constraint in doing the task. But it's important to know that if you are building an enterprise solution, and again would be relevant certainly in your critical infrastructure world, many different interrelated stakeholders, and you need to try and get to a level of detail on the pain. So we'll come shortly to some of the tools and techniques for doing that. I just want to give you one last example. This might look quite complex, and it is deliberately so. This is just an example based on a company I used to run in the past regarding building tools for data analytics teams. And here you're starting to break down specific customer segments on the left-hand side, individual persons within those, and you try to get as specific as possible. And you try to clarify what is the problem that they have in performing their business and what task or constraint may be causing them to have those problems. So the point I want to repeat, I suppose, and hammer home before we move to the second area is the pain is everything. because it is ultimately what you're basing your customer engagement around. You could get lost in the tools and the methods and the techniques, but the key is to try and focus on, as some of the sales literature would say, sell the problem you solve, not the product. So they focus in your conversations all the time, not on your critical infrastructure piece of software, your Internet of Things measurement, your 5G technology that moves data faster than anything private. It kind of doesn't really matter if you don't properly connect it to the problem of the customer. And Theodore Levitt is a very famous economist, and he, I thought, put it very succinctly, that says when people go out to drill a hole, they don't want to buy a 1/4-inch drill, really. They just want a 1/4-inch hole. So it's a nice way of trying to remember in your mind, focus on the pain. So the key takeaways, I would say, from this topic 1, and I know I might have overstated over and over again, but the reason I do that is because you cannot spend enough time focused on what is the pain, how does it impact you, the organization, can you put a value on it, and then ultimately how your solution might address that. So that's first thoughts in terms of how you might build customer relations and engagement. What I'd like to move on to next is, okay, so how do we use some tools and techniques to capture that and capture it into our business planning in a way that's challengeable and can be tested in different ways. And primarily there's 2 tools of that. And you know, you may have heard about them many times, you may have used them, and yet often they are misused and abused in terms of what they can and cannot do. So we're going to talk about 2 of these tools, the value proposition canvas and the business model canvas. And just for reference, these are created by these gentlemen many years ago at this point. But we're going to walk through all that conversation we just had about pain and building that, and how you might map it onto a value proposition canvas, and where that fits in the context of a business model. So first of all, at the heart of a value proposition canvas is a value proposition, and you know, it's again stating perhaps the obvious, but as Stephen Coveney said, it's to try to first understand and then be understood. So you're trying to say, here's my hypothesis, here's how I think this will work, but then I want to challenge it with various customer feedback and hopefully help to build that proposition alongside your customers. So let's step into it. So what is a value proposition canvas? It has 2 blocks to it, basically, a value proposition and the customer profile you're targeting. It's nothing more than a tool. It's a very useful tool, but it is a tool to help you stay focused on the customer. And you'll see in a moment as we build through this, and I'll go through an example of how you might build one. You always start from the right-hand side, from the customer. What is the customer problem, issue, so on that you want to address, and then start to build your proposition of how you might address it. So effectively, you start with the customer problems, build a hypothesis of, okay, we think we could do it this way, and then hopefully challenge it by really validating that with your customers and partners and those in the market. So a value proposition canvas, let's step into it a little bit more. Probably one of the easiest ways to walk through it is to take an example, and it's an example that's been used many times, but it is still an interesting, I think, one to bring forward a simple idea. So we're going to take the concept of building a value proposition canvas around Uber. the car ride company. And the hypothesis here was that if you had a booking app that could connect drivers with customers, it ultimately would make the whole job a lot easier. So their proposition was one tap, a car comes directly to you, the driver knows exactly where to go, and the payment is completely cashless. Now, today in our world, that doesn't seem revolutionary, but clearly when Uber was putting this together, it most definitely was. And then you have different methods by which you might actually engage with an Uber car. So let's step through this value proposition. This is taking it from a blank canvas. On the right hand side, we're going to go through our customer profile, and on the left, we're going to go through the value proposition. So step one is very much, who are you building this value proposition around? So if we took our Uber example, you may have many different types of travelers that you could orientate different types of solutions. So it might be tourists, families, commuters. We're going to take the example of a business traveler and assume that's the problem we're trying to solve in this particular value proposition. And starting from the right-hand side, as I said, step two is to try and focus on what are the actual customer jobs to be done. What is it that the customer, the business traveler in this case, actually cares about? Forget about technology or anything. Just, I want to book a taxi. I want to be able to get to my meeting, maybe stress-free. So these are just suggestions. Clearly, they might vary, and they would vary in each business case. But by engaging with your customers, you try and figure out, well, what are you really looking for? The next step is to try and then understand, so what are the pains or gains that you would hope to get? So let's say on the pains, some of the big issues, again, you have to cast your mind back to pre-Uber times. Payment. Do you have enough cash in your pocket? Not everybody was carrying around electronic cash at the time. I might get in a different country, I get a language a driver that doesn't speak my language. I book a car to arrive up at the airport. I find it hard to find where's my driver, who do I find the person? So these are all things that you would like to overcome to make your job easier. And then there are probably some other pieces from a business travel that you might look like. I'm sure lots of people on the call who travel for EU projects, receipts. You know, you want this to be as simple as possible, as easy as possible. Maybe you'd like choice of vehicles if you're trying to, I don't know, impress your girlfriend or something, that you have a better car to pick you up. But you have some alternative gains in your environment as opposed to just the job to be done. So step three, what are the pains that are there now, today? And what are the kind of gains that you would get hopefully from it? Only then, once you've got that customer profile, do you start to move to the other side and start to look at your proposition that says, okay, what could I do to relieve some of these pains? So maybe on the drive, I'll be able to show exactly where you're going. Perhaps something is going to be in the language of the person. There may be some other really handy things I could do, like an email receipt. Actually says it twice, there you go, choice of cars, so on. So there's various gain creators, things that will actually make a real benefit and hopefully delight this business traveler, or remove some of the pains. And step five is an important one, because ideally you're trying to make sure that your pain is actually relieving some, the pain relievers are actually relieving some pain over here. So maybe you get things in the language that you're traveling in. You can see exactly who your driver is. Maybe driver ratings will help to give you a feeling of safety. And obviously your email receipt shows you history and so on. So think of all the work we've done here to profile the customer, understand what things we have that might actually be able to help them. We have not yet got to defining what does our product or service look like? Because it's only then you start to look at, okay, maybe I need certain types of cars, maybe I need certain types of drivers, maybe I need certain behaviors. But the orientation is significantly on the customer, the pains, and how you would address them. So your value proposition canvas is a way of capturing all those pains, putting them on a structure in a way that has a relatively easy and just to understand model that you can challenge with your partners, challenge with your customers, validate it, and keep validating, because the reality is things change. What was an important or critical job at one point might not be the next point. So smart innovators will, the same as they would do on the science that they're working on or the products they're developing, they will constantly reassess, is this still the most important thing from my customer? So the value proposition canvas, in simple terms, what is it? A way of having a single clear picture of the customer problem you're trying to solve. And you'd probably already be starting to be sick of me repeating so many times to focus on the pain and focus on the customer, but ultimately it's the route to success. Let's move on to the next area, business model canvas. And yeah, there's a lot of words here and I deliberately throw them up because a business model canvas gets represented in many different ways. Is it a strategic management tool? Yes, for sure. Visualize components of a business? Yes. Align resources across the business? Yes. Focused on the customer, innovation aid, all of those things. Because in effect, it is your business model on a page. And that has a significant value for trying to convey to somebody in a consistent and coherent way, what does my business do, or what does this future business that I'm trying to create do? What would a solution in the critical infrastructure world, what would it need to look like? What are all the components of that business? So again, let's step into what is actually in the business model canvas for those that might be not that comfortable with it or aware of it. 9 blocks, 9 different components. Over on the right-hand side is very much focused outwards on the customer and what happens with customers. And the back end, the other 4 elements are very focused on the internals of your business and how it functions. So it starts from who are your customers? What are the value propositions around how you would meet them? You'll see the connection here in a moment. The channels, the methods by which you might reach those customers. Is it a piece of software? Is it a physical thing you're shipping, whatever? And what kind of relationship do you have with them in terms of, is it a very much you meet them all individually because it's extremely high value? Or the ultimate low connection is just you buy it off a website and have very little connection with the real customer. So there are a huge spectrum of relationships and channels to reach certain customers with different propositions. Ultimately, it needs to make revenue or somehow sustain itself, even in a public world, a publicly funded. It has to be clear how much it costs and how it is going to be funded over several years. So those first 5 elements are focused very much outwards on the customer. And then we move back into, to make all that happen, what are the key resources we need? What are the things they need to do? What other partners might help us to actually achieve that? And ultimately, how much would all that cost? So this is a 9-block model, which we're going to go through in a little bit more detail to simply describe in one consistent language in a way that can be challenged and examined in different ways. How does my business work? How might a future business work? How could the business be modified or changed? All of those are highly relevant in terms of something you can support on a canvas. So just stepping into them in a little bit more detail, the numbers here describe what is the recommended, and I would highly suggest this is the way to follow, the order in which you should build your canvas. Now, first things you'll see right here is that block 1 on customer segments and block 2 on value proposition are effectively what you've created in your value proposition canvas. So the tie-in here, the connection, is starting with the customer. Who are they? What do they need? Building your proposition around them. So you could have thousands of questions about your customer, but mostly you're trying to figure out, are there different segments, their behaviors, their needs, and what is it that you can do specifically to help them? Number 3, in order, starts to go looking at, okay, so how would I reach them? How would I connect to them? How would I sell to them? Again, it's not always in the comfort zone of the research world, because they tend to focus very much on the tools and the proposition and the technologies. But ultimately, we have to at least try to think about how would we deliver that to our customer? And what kind of relationships would we have with them? Is it just a buy something off a website, sign up with a credit card, or is it incredibly complex 6 months to a year process of trying to integrate what we're doing into their world? Because remember, back at the very start, we said there has to be change. Things are going to have to change in your customer's world. They're going to have to behave slightly differently to take on what you're offering. So they got to be ready to do all that. Number 5 in sequence. So we've gone through segments, value proposition, how we reach them and how we maintain those relationships. And then we're into how do we make money? As much as we might like the world to be somewhat different, it has to make money. Not necessarily for a profit, but just to be sustainable. If you cannot find that method, it's unlikely to be sustained into the future. Number 6, what are all the resources I need? Might be the reality in most of the companies or technologies that we work in today. These are people. The biggest resources tend to be people, because that's where the intellectual capital sits and the intellectual knowledge. Focus on what do they do all the time? Who are the partners that might help them, intermediaries that would particularly help you perhaps reach these customers in different ways or accelerate how you reach them? And then ultimately, how much is this all going to cost? So 1 page, 9 boxes describing in simple terms, how does my business function? When you take it in combination with the value proposition canvas of here's my customer, what I offer them, and then start to look at how I deliver to them, it's a very powerful method of, in a consistent way, being able to have a conversation with a range of different people. And you might end up with something, if we went back to our Uber example, that looked, and this is a very simplistic one, but that looked at the fact that actually Uber has 2 very big customer worlds to think about, passengers and drivers. And there are different propositions for different segments. Passengers want taxis that are cash free and easy and so on. Drivers want more ways to make money and easy access to partners. How they reach them on channels, lots of them, the mobile app, social media, marketing. The relationships, highly automated. You never really, very unlikely you're going to talk to a person from Uber as a business. So it's that whole technology is moved away from needing to interact. And various methods of how you might make money and how Uber makes money from that whole process. Interesting things like what are their key resources for them? Well, the platform itself, the algorithm, because the pricing and routing algorithm are at the core of that business. That's what makes that business more clever than others. what are the things they might have to do all the time? Lots of marketing, trying to bring new drivers on board, and then key players who they have to work with, payment processors, for example, maybe local authorities, which has been clearly problematic in certain countries. And ultimately, they have all the key costs. Some of them are pure infrastructure. Some of them are direct payments back to drivers. But as you can see, even relatively simplistic, it conveys a lot of information very quickly and would allow for this to be challenged in many different ways, or to challenge the expectations in certain areas and go back through it. So second topic was exploring the intricacies of the business model, canvas, and value proposition, which is quite a long title. But the things I'd like you to take away is that you have to have a strong value proposition. That seems very obvious, but that's a value proposition focused on customer. And your canvas is a great way to keep you focused on your customer, hopefully helping you build solutions that are of value to those customers, and ultimately solutions that are used. The worst is you build something and it never gets used. That's unfortunately is the death of the business. The business model canvas is much more about, do I have a sustainable business? Can it work? So one focus on the customer, one focused on, will it work? The third topic that Kevin asked me to take a look at was impactful business model implementations. And I thought about this for a while, and I thought, well, what is an impactful business model? And I would come with the view that the only measure is, does it work and does it keep working? So whatever environment that might be in, whether it's in, does it work initially, means at least a large enough volume of customers or partners, customers have seen a value in it to make this function and survive and prosper, whether it's for a profit motive or as a service motive in the public world. But then a bigger challenge often is, well, does it keep working? Does that business still survive the inevitable changes over time? So I pulled out a few just to give you a feeling of, household names and how they might map onto a business model canvas. I realize the colors are not great here, but hopefully you can see it. So our good friend McDonald's, who have certainly proven an ability to last a long time, they focus on certain customer segments that they would target in different ways. Value proposition is straightforward enough in terms of, I'm going to give you fast food in a fast way, hopefully. Their channels are very much franchised globally, lots of customer relationships. Yes, people coming in, but it's really a media process of keeping them engaged. Lots of different ways of making money in terms of the actual selling to restaurants and franchises. And then all the elements that actually go into making all that come together. This is a very simplistic version of what McDonald's does, but what I would try to, again, convey to you is that you can get the essence of what that business does very quickly, and you could start to challenge sections or elements of it. Somebody like Zara, who's obviously hugely successful as a clothing brand across Europe, targeted different customer segments, perhaps with different propositions for different areas, some online and direct, again, some different. So they actually have quite a lot of different relationships at different levels, and ultimately it's about selling clothes. Yeah, lots more effort in terms of how the companies are structured, very complex organizational structure, doing a very simple thing. How do I move clothes quickly to a point of customer? Tesla and our friend Elon Musk, bit more complex in the areas, but it's interesting things like who might be their target customer segments that you see Elon Musk fans, and there are obviously some, and there are some that are not. But for them, there are some that would actually see buying a Tesla as being part of the Elon Musk brand. And it's interesting that they may see an opportunity, or a business like that might see an opportunity to focus on different things that would not be what you would consider normal in terms of what's a way of positioning your company. And a final example in terms of Airbnb. So again, simple booking processes, competitive prices, a lot of interaction with partners here to make this actually viable as a real business. So why am I going through those numbers and methods? They are all examples of organizations who have managed to build very compelling business models very quickly. But many of the business models that are created are in fact, excellent. They're excellent because they burn very brightly for a period of time. But as you can see from the examples here, there are many that don't sustain that process going forward. Now, I wouldn't be as simplistic as to say they're all because they didn't adapt fast enough, but you could say they've just not recognized the change around them or adapted fast enough. Whether it's some of them are exploding, like our friends in Elon Musk again with Twitter, because of just poor execution, but others may be because they've not continued to focus on what the customer needs, what they want that solution to deliver for them. So there are many business models that are fantastic, but either the strategy of how it's actually executed falls down, or it doesn't adapt quickly enough to change. So be aware of that. I guess in your planning, you can usually only plan for within a certain window, but business planning, it's not like you build your business model canvas once and say, that's my business. I'm now done. I'm finished. It's a constant process because real life changes, customer change, business change. So I think I'm coming to a conclusion across the various elements. We talked about customer engagement, talked about value propositions, and the business model canvas. And the things I'd like you to hopefully take away is on the pain side, if you cannot get to sufficient pain, nothing will change. So no matter how wonderful your solution is, no matter how wonderful the technology is, if it doesn't solve the problem sufficiently, it won't prosper. We talked about the value proposition canvas, which is an excellent method of keeping you focused on your customer and hopefully building solutions that really resonate with them. And finally, business model canvas is about trying to assess if you have a sustainable business and constantly refining that because real life changes. So those are the key things I wanted to go through today. As Kevin said at the start, just a couple of wrap-ups. This is for 2 of the webinars we go through in a number of areas. I could go through many other areas here, but I'm just focusing on those. From this piece, there is some homework effectively for those that are interested. It says here the tools we'll be sharing through Kevin on these ones. There are probably some others as well, but primarily around these. And again, as Kevin outlined, the goal here is to hopefully through these sessions, and for those that aren't attending online, maybe you'll look back at them offline on the recording, take advantage of the templates and the support from Inlecom Commercial Pathways from ICP. We have a fantastic team of people like Kevin and many others who are really adept at helping teams to understand how to build some of the things we had here relevant to their work. And we can do that in one-on-one sessions as follow-ons for those that need some help. So with that, I think that's the end of what I was going to go through, Kevin, and I'm very happy to take questions if anybody has questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patrick. A theme that seems to be running through which Patrick certainly touched upon and which we touched upon in the last webinar, is, yeah, the whole point is, what does the customer want? And as a scientist, I myself, I find this, something I need to, and Colin himself raised this last time, this is a point we need to keep in our, at the forefront of our minds. So do we have any questions from people? You are too
Hi
good,
there.
Patrick.
Everyone's really quiet.
I wasn't going to take it as a bad thing if anything had no questions.
He explained everything perfectly.
Yeah, I guess I have a practical question and just a statement. I think it's really interesting listening to your explanation, and I found it fascinating